Hey guys, how you doing? Welcome back to another video. It's another daily video on the Jim Daly. Oh, I should have done a pun on that. Anyway, on the Jim Daly Comedy channel. I hope you're enjoying them. Great to see people getting involved in the comments in the last few. Today, I'm going to do my underrated player for every Premier League team, as in current Premier League team that started next season, so including the promoted teams. If you're new here, before we start, please do subscribe for these daily videos, songs, sketches. I just put up a short. I do shorts, comedy sketches, lots of stuff going on my channel. Subscribe, hit that bell so you get notifications every time there's a video, which currently is every day. Drop a like, comment below, let me know if I'm right about the underrated players or who you think the underrated players are in the Premier League. And if you want to support the channel going forward, join my Patreon, where for a couple of quid a month, you can join our Discord, where we talk about football all the time. You can get mentioned in the videos, in the descriptions, although I might read them out at the end of today's video as well, my patrons. Why not, as a little bonus? And get behind-the-scenes footage and extra content. So join below. The Patreon link is below this video. Right, that's it. Let's get into my underrated players for every Premier League team. Right, before I start, I just want to get a disclaimer out there. These are underrated players, not from the fans of each club, because I know that all of you now, if whatever team you support, you're going to be commenting, how is he saying that guy? We love that guy. I know that. Fans of clubs see things differently to the wider world. This is more like players who are underappreciated by the wider footballing community. Fans like me who maybe don't support their club don't see them as often. But I'd love you to get involved in the comments and let me know, no, we are whoever, Arsenal, Villa, we love this guy, etc., etc. Please do get involved. This is not meant to be a slam. This is meant to be a discussion opener. Also, bear in mind, this is a comedy channel, so this is based purely on vibes. There are minimal stats here. If you want stats-based football opinion, go and follow James Alcott, who is a very good YouTuber. And actually, it's a random fact. We've known each other since we were very young. So we did football camps together in America in the mid-2000s. Here's a photo. There you go. Random YouTube football fact. Anyway, let's get into it. My underrated players for the Premier League, starting with Arsenal, and I'm going to go for Reiss Nelson. I think this guy is fantastic. I didn't realise his name was actually Reiss Nelson. I thought it was a double-barreled last name, so I've learned something today. Doesn't seem to get a lot of game time at Arsenal, but always seems to pop up with important goals, as he did last season. I'm sure the Arsenal fans love him. I think he's great. Doesn't seem to get much love from the wider football community. So my first player for the underappreciated Premier League teams for Arsenal is Reiss Nelson. Let's move on to Aston Villa, and I've gone for Jacob Ramsey. Yes, I know Villa fans, what you're thinking right now, yeah, I'm sure you love Jacob Ramsey, and I think he's fantastic. And obviously a very good England under-21 player, so well respected in the football community, but doesn't seem to get a lot of love from outside Villa, even though he seems to play nearly all the time and always seems to pop up with goals and assists. I think Jacob Ramsey is fantastic. I could see him being an England international in the future. Let's get some more love for him and the wider football community. Jacob Ramsey is my underappreciated, underrated player for Aston Villa. Let's move on to Bournemouth, and I've gone for Neto. Is he the only goalkeeper on my list? Stay tuned to find out. I think he's fantastic. Bournemouth fans, do you like him? Do you rate him? Do you not? I think he's one of the reasons Bournemouth did so well last season and did so well against the odds. No one seems to talk about him, but I think he's a very solid goalkeeper. And I love the fact that his name sounds like a nickname you'd give to someone who goes in goal. Oh, look, it's old Neto going in goal. Brilliant. Absolutely perfect. Right, let's move on to my next team, which is Brentford, and I've gone for Matthias Jensen. Another player who I'm sure is loved by Brentford fans, but no one seems to talk about him outside of Brentford. But last season, he kept popping up with assists and goals, was brilliant in fantasy football, FPL, although I never actually personally went there, but I'm considering him for this season. A brilliant, brilliant player. One of the reasons Brentford does so well. Never seems to get love from anyone apart from Brentford fans. So my underrated player for Brentford is Matthias Jensen. Let's move on to Brighton. Very difficult, Brighton, because the media loves them, so they're talking about their players all the time. Very difficult to find an underappreciated or underrated player for Brighton, because everyone seems to love them, and they had a fantastic season, and that pains me as a Palace fan to say that. But my player that's underrated at Brighton I'm going to go for is Danny Welbeck. Now, that's more based on his history at United and Arsenal, but he has been fantastic for Brighton. I don't know if he plays regularly, Brighton fans, does he? He seems to sort of sometimes pop up with runs of games, but he scores some crucial goals, seems to hold the ball up very well, always seems to be involved, and I'm watching Brighton in any good phases of play, and he has that lovely little dink finish he loves to do over the goalkeeper. I think Welbeck's fantastic. Everyone else seems to think he's a joke. I'm sure Brighton fans love him. I think he's great. Let's move on to Burnley. First promoted team. So I will say out there, difficult for me because I don't watch a lot of football outside the Premier League. But for Burnley, I'm going to go with the player who's been there quite a long time and I've always thought was very good, and that is Goodmanson. He is getting on now, 32 years old, but a very good player. Seems to be both-footed, has been there a while, clocked up quite a lot of games at Burnley last season, so I assume he's still a first-team player and will play this season depending on transfers. Burnley fans, I'm sure you love him. Let me know in the comments. But I think Goodmanson is a fantastic player. Looking forward to seeing him back in the Prem this season with Burnley. Let's move on to Chelsea. Hard to find an underrated player for Chelsea because they're all so terrible. Let's be honest. Not terrible. Underperforming, I would say. So it's been a difficult time to be a Chelsea player and a Chelsea fan, I'm sure. But my underrated player, and this might be controversial, is Mason Mount. Now, Chelsea fans, this might be one you actually disagree with because a lot of people seem to hate on Mason Mount. But he gets picked all the time, regular for England, regular for Chelsea. And I think that's because he's a very reliable player. And I actually think he's a very, very good player. But for some reason, this narrative has been formed around him that he's not very good. Maybe because his output isn't particularly fantastic in terms of goals and assists. But I think Mason Mount is great. Seems like a nice kid, works very hard. I think he's actually very underappreciated, certainly by England fans. By Chelsea fans too? Let me know in the comments. Let's move on to Crystal Palace, the home of football. Again, difficult to underrate players at Palace because everyone seems to talk about how good our players are at the moment. And we do have some fantastic players in our squad. But for me, as a season ticket holder at Palace and a regular watcher of all our games, the person that goes under the radar, I think, outside the club is Tyreek Mitchell, who is a fantastic left-back. Did have a difficult sort of first half of the season this year, but when Roy came in, and actually even before that, his form really picked up. A really solid defender. Improved his output going forward. A lovely, lovely lad. Well respected at Palace. Has played for England. I think you'll see more of him playing for England. But I think possibly due to the struggles that Aaron Wan-Bissaka's had at Man United, I think a lot of people think that Mitchell might not be the real deal. But I'm telling you that he is. Let's move on to Everton. And I've gone for Alex Iwobi. Another player who I think, due to his Arsenal form, that people think is a bit of a joke. I think Iwobi's fantastic. I'd love to see him at Palace. A real unpredictable vibe to him. Has popped up with some really important moments for Everton this season as they battled against the drop. I think he's brilliant. Everton fans, what do you think? Let me know in the comments. I think he's massively underappreciated outside the club. So for me, Alex Iwobi, what a player. Let's move on to Fulham. And I've gone for another player who I think is loved at Fulham, but maybe less so outside, Harrison Reed. Maybe because he doesn't quite look like a footballer. He's very ginger. And let's be honest, ginger footballers don't tend to get much love. I know Fulham fans love him. He's been great on FPL. I think he's a fantastic, industrious midfielder. Pops up with the odd important goal. I think Harrison Reed is fantastic. Needs to get more love outside of Fulham. And in general, I think ginger players maybe need to get a bit more love as well. Let's start that campaign right now on this video. But right now, let's move on to our next team, which is Liverpool. Two players potentially up for here for most underrated. I was going to go Joel Matip, who I think is brilliant, but I think people think is a bit of a joke. Not quite sure why. But the player I'm going to go with, and this might be controversial, probably the most controversial pick in this video, is Darwin Núñez. Yes, missed a lot of chances last season, but if you look at his stats, was getting into goal-scoring opportunities at a frightening rate. I think the guy can finish. I think he was low on confidence, and I think we saw in spells he is the real deal and he's got it. So definitely a bit of a laughing stock outside of Liverpool. Liverpool fans, what do you think? Let me know. Do you like him? Do you think it's a joke as well? I think he's massively underrated. I think this season could be a huge season for him at Liverpool. So for me, I'm going for Darwin Núñez. And yes, I will do a song about him at some point. We'll see. Anyway, moving on to the next team. It's another promoted team. It's Luton. Another promoted team who I've said already I think are going to surprise people this season. I think they're going to stay up. I said that in my other video. But in terms of players, I think most of them are unknown, so probably underrated, you know, by default. The player that I do know a little bit about is Fred Onyedina, who I saw play for Wickham when I went to go watch them play a couple of years ago in lockdown. Very exciting player. I don't know how much of a regular he is at Luton, but I think he could, if he gets game time, do some business for Luton this season. Luton fans, do you rate him? Let me know. Am I completely wrong with this one? I'm sure most other players, most other fans haven't even heard of him. So I'm going to put him as my default underrated player for Luton, but I'm going to keep an eye on him this season. Let's move on to Man City. Impossible to underrate any of their players, given how good they are. I nearly went for a Kanji, but I think people think he's very good. I nearly went for Nathan Ake, but I think he's really proved himself this season, and people are starting to appreciate that. The player that I'm going to go for is Kyle Walker. Now, again, that might be controversial, but I feel like people thought Kyle Walker would be phased out when Pep started bringing in more defenders, but he's still there, still technically the fastest player in the Premier League and still continues to deliver. So I don't know if underappreciated, underrated is the right phrase, but I think Kyle Walker certainly seems to keep proving himself in the City squad. So he's my pick for this. But this was a very difficult one for Man City, let's be honest. Moving on to Man United. Plenty of picks here. I could have gone for Harry Maguire. I could have gone for Lindelof. But the player that I'm going to go for is a player who I still think outside of United, people laud as a bit of a joke. But I know that United fans rate him and like him, and that is Fred. I think Fred's fantastic. Really found his stride with United after a difficult start there. Pops up with important goals. Seems like a fun character. Great hair. I like Fred a lot. I think he's massively underrated outside of Man United, but I think he's very, very good indeed. Let's move on to my next team, which is Newcastle. Again, difficult to underrate players here, given how well they've done this season. But the player I'm going to go for is someone who doesn't really look like a footballer, doesn't really sort of talk like a footballer, but has done a great job for them. He moved from Brighton up there. He is a Geordie, and it's Dan Burn. Probably more famous for his dance moves than actually playing, but he's a very, very good player. Plays left back, I think, for Newcastle. Can play centre back. He's obviously 10'5", so he's good in the air. Again, seems like a lovely lad. I think people think he's a bit of a joke, but I think Newcastle fans rate him, and so do I. So my underrated pick for Newcastle is Dan Burn. Let's move on to Nottingham Forest. A team that I predicted to go down in my video yesterday. I know Forest fans are getting agitated by that in the comments. I hope I'm proved wrong with that. But anyway, my underrated player for Forest, and I had a lot of players that really shone last season, but my underrated player is a former Palace player who I actually am gutted that we sold. I think he's very good. Did really well for Forest this season. And that is Cech Kouyaté. Very good player. Really does a job in midfield. I think most fans don't even think about Cech Kouyaté, but I know, having watched him at Palace, he's very, very good. And I think he's very good for Forest. So my underrated player for Forest is Cech Kouyaté. Moving on to Sheffield United, another promoted team, but quite a few faces from when they went down a couple of years ago. Sander Berger is in there, Baldock is in there, but the player I'm going to pick, who I think was there last time they went down, who again I think people think is a bit of a joke, but actually looking at his stats for last season, can score goals, and that is Ollie McBurney. Does look very Sunday League, probably the most Sunday League player in the Premier League. And again, another ginger player who doesn't get rated. So this is a theme for this video today. But I think he's a goal scorer. He's a handful. Whether he can translate that to the Premier League is we'll wait to see. But I think McBurney is a good player, done well in the Championship, and I think he's very underrated. Let's move on to Tottenham. Loads of candidates here because they've been so terrible recently. But my pick for underrated player is a player who continues to get picked. I think he was captain at one point, even though a lot of, certainly England fans, think he's an absolute joke. And that is Eric Dyer. And for a while, I also thought he was terrible, a bit of a joke. But actually, Eric Dyer, I think he's actually fairly consistent. And Spurs fans, let me know if I'm wrong in the comments. But I think actually is one of those guys who seems terrible, but actually sort of pulls it out of the bag most weeks. So I'm going to go for Eric Dyer for underrated, underappreciated. But let me know if I'm wrong, Spurs fans. Am I wide of the mark with that one? Into the final couple of clubs, let's go to West Ham. I found this one quite difficult, actually, because a lot of their players are fairly well known, and there aren't that many players in their squad that I think people underappreciate. So this might be slightly controversial, but I'm going to go for Lanzini. Seems to be in and out of the team, but always pops up with important goals. I think he's a very, very good player. Saw him at Selhurst Park last season, West Ham, season before last, when West Ham beat us 3-2, and he ran the game. He was absolutely brilliant. West Ham fans, do you like him? Does he frustrate you? I feel like outside of the club, people think he's a bit of a bit part player, but I think he's actually very, very good. So underrated possibly by West Ham and by outside of West Ham. That takes me to my final club, which is Wolves, and my underrated player here is Craig Dawson. Pains me to say it because actually I'm not a fan of Craig Dawson. A few years ago, he elbowed Julian Speroni in one of the first seasons after we came up and didn't get a red card for it. Seems to have that in his game, but is actually a very good defender. Did very well for Wolves last season, and for a club around their position in the table, is pretty reliable. Pops up with the odd important goal. I think he scored against City last season, didn't he? Very good player, Dawson. And I think Wolves are going to be... I saw in the comments in my video yesterday, people think Wolves will struggle. And I might have to revise my prediction on there because I think, having lost quite a lot of big players this summer, I think they will. But if they stay up, Dawson will be one of the reasons they did. So there you go. Those are my underrated players for the Premier League. Those are my underrated players for the Premier League this season. Let me know in the comments. Am I right? Am I wrong? Am I wide of the mark? Have I actually landed on someone that you really like and think is underappreciated. Subscribe if you're new here for videos currently every day. So getting a lot of content and shorts and comedy songs, and hit the bell for notifications. Drop a like, comment below, and join my Patreon to help support this channel going forward. And I'm now going to shout out my current patrons. I've got 4. They're all absolute legends. Evan Quigley, Matthew Javois, hope I said your name there right, Matthew, Marlon Christensen, and Jack Mackenzie Kerr. Legends. We're in the Discord group. We're chatting about football most days. Join up, become part of the community, and help this channel go forward and get your name mentioned in videos. That's it. I'll be back tomorrow with another video. Until then, take care. See you in the comments. See you again soon.